Welcome to another episode of Counterpoint, recorded in the Vox Box of the European Parliament. In 1991, the UN revoked the despicable Zionism is racism resolution. But in Europe, in 2019, anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism are increasingly on vogue again. And the artificial distinction that some would like to draw between these two phenomena is increasingly exposed as just that, artificial. Just this weekend, French Jewish philosopher Alain Finkielkraut was attacked by yellow vest protesters as both dirty Jew and dirty Zionist. In this house, parliamentarian Ana Gomez held a BDS event and simultaneously called Jewish organizations that protested against this anti-Israeli event as a very perverse lobby. But nowhere has anti-Zionism taken such root in mainstream politics as in Great Britain. And with us here to discuss this are Hannah Rose, president of the Jewish Student Organization for the UK and Ireland, and Lukas Mandl, member of the European Parliament from Austria for the EPP. Perhaps first to you, Hannah. In Great Britain, the Labour Party has been accused of being taken over by anti-Semitism. You have yourself personal experience. Please tell us a little bit about what happened to you and what the consequences are that you have drawn from this.
Well, I joined the Labour Party in 2016 as a student because I saw it as an expression of my Jewish values of social justice and equality. But by the time that I resigned in September 2018, I saw those values as incompatible, and I saw that the fight for social justice and equality was not happening in the Labour Party because they were ignoring this anti-Semitism that has pervaded the party at all levels. And it's come to the point now where its own MPs have called it institutionally anti-Semitic, and many Jewish members have quit the party because the Labour movement does not see it as its responsibility to remove this scourge of anti-Semitism. It doesn't see it, and it doesn't have the political will to remove it. And it's got to the point where I can no longer see my place in the Labour Party whilst anti-Semitism pervades so deeply.
Right. Many people are accusing of Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the Labour Party, of not being able to control anti-Semitism, but he himself seems to be the biggest part of the problem, isn't it?
Well, I think this discussion is aptly titled as the interlinking sentiments behind anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, because what once started as legitimate criticism of Israel has pervaded into anti-Semitism. And there's a front at all levels of the party, not just in the leadership, where people hide behind this excuse of, oh, it's just legitimate criticism of Israel.
Right.
I'm just criticizing Israel, when actually the tropes they use, the language they use, the sentiments that it comes from, and in fact the impact of it is on Jewish people, Zionist or not Zionist themselves.
Right. Well, we have concretely with Jeremy Corbyn somebody who has called Hamas and Hezbollah members friends, who has certainly been in the same circles with Holocaust deniers. We had him paying tribute to the terrorist who committed the terrorist attack on the Israeli team in the Munich Olympic Games. So we see him in himself embodying or expressing a manifestation of the problem he's supposed to control within his party. Is that even possible?
Well, there's a debate about whether it's Corbyn or Corbynism, and perhaps it's a combination of combating all the different elements of anti-Semitism within the party that will solve this crisis.
Right.
Jeremy Corbyn, I don't know if he's an anti-Semite or not, but the people he associates himself with, the rhetoric that he normalizes, and the fact that the lack of political will. I mean, you can stand up and call yourself an anti-racist as much as you want, but unless you actually follow up with actions, which he and the leadership and many people in the Labour Party haven't done, then it's not credible at all.
Right. Mr. Mandl, why is it important for you to fight this phenomenon? Why do you think it's important for the European Union, specifically the European Parliament, to stand up against anti-Zionism?
European Parliament is representing the citizens of the European Union, and that's why, in my view, we have a clear obligation to fight anti-Semitism within our societies, to fight anti-Zionism in all its dimensions and the different phases it appears, and also to see Israel as a strong partner on a global scale, a strong partner with regard to what we sometimes call European values, which are actually universal values. Let's call it human dignity, individual freedom, which lead to rule of law, to democracy, to our understanding of a modern society. And who is defending these values in the region? It's only Israel. Israel is clearly the ally, the partner on a global scale. So there is, let's say, a whole package of things we have to understand in Europe. And I'm more than happy that I can say today that European Parliament has voted with a large majority in favor of a clear definition of anti-Semitism in order to have the opportunity to better fight anti-Semitism. And part of this definition is also anti-Zionism, which is very important. Also the European Council, during and driven by the Austrian presidency of the European Council, has decided on this definition of anti-Semitism. So there's a lot of work to do, not only legislative work, which is important, but also educational work all over Europe, reaching out via media, via social media, combating anti-Semitism in its different forms, but not stopping there. Also to fight anti-Zionism and to work together with Israel on a global scale. That is actually a step forward for the world generally, because if we count these values as universal values, we have to defend them wherever they appear. And we know also because of these values, Israel is under pressure in this region by other parts of the region. So there are many good reasons for strengthening on this issue in this European Parliament, and of course also in the future European Parliament in the coming up 5 years, the next mandate after the election.
Right. You've mentioned that the Austrian presidency played a pivotal role in pushing through a declaration that endorsed the so-called IRA working definition on anti-Semitism, which includes examples of anti-Zionism, meaning the demonization of Israel or holding Jews responsible for Israel. And indeed, Chancellor Sebastian Kurz is really the prominent voice probably right now among European leaders making this a priority. What is sort of, in your view, the reception in Austria on this relatively new role for an Austrian government to be so prominently involved in this fight and so prominently being on the side of Israel?
I'm more than happy that we can say today that the Republic of Austria as a state is clearer than any time before today in working together with Israel, in seeing Israel as an ally. I have actually initiated a remembrance project in Austria, in my hometown, in different regions. I try to support authorities on local levels also to focus on remembrance, on what happened during Holocaust, during Shoah in former times. So I don't like to say we have learned from history, because we always have to learn from history. It's an ongoing thing, but we really try to focus on it, and we try to educate the youth on it, and to have dialogue with the youth as well, with youth which originally is born and raised in Austria, as well as the one who comes in due to migration, and that's why we have a lot to do. But again, it also seems important to me not to stop with remembrance and with mourning the victims, which is very, very important, and let's say part of a civilization. But we also have to focus on Jewish life of today in Austria, in Europe, and in the best case provide a good example in each and every member state of the European Union to the others, and to also defend Israel against anti-Zionism, which means in most of the cases, double standards in treating, let's say, Israel as a state, in treating the Israel government. These double standards already must be counted as anti-Zionistic, and in the end also to see Israel as an ally in daily politics and in everything that threatens what I called values. And these values are not theoretically, they mean a lot to practical life of people, to their chances in life via education, via individual freedom to make their lives better and to make maybe the world a better place.
Right. So anti-Zionism, the rejection of the right of the Jewish people alone among the people in the world to self-determination is clearly anti-Semitic. But what is often neglected or overlooked is, irrespective of that concept, what the impact of anti-Zionism is not just on Israel as a state, but on Jewish life in Europe. And maybe, Hannah, you have some personal experiences with it. What does it mean that a party like Labour Party is taken over by anti-Zionist activists? And what is life nowadays on campus for Jewish students? How does it manifest itself?
So I think it's first worth looking specifically at the link between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. And I wouldn't say that, although anti-Zionism is very often anti-Semitism, it isn't always anti-Semitism, I don't think. And there are, for example, some people just don't believe in the concept of a state, therefore they don't believe in the concept of a Jewish state. That's not exceptional to Jewish people, that's just they don't believe in statehood throughout the world. So whether that's anti-Semitic is a different debate. There's also, of course,
if they apply this to every nation state
Absolutely.
and want to abolish all nation states, then that's something different.
So I wouldn't agree with that politically,
right.
but that isn't necessarily anti-Semitic.
But that's not necessarily what we're talking about.
No. So definitely in many iterations, it is anti-Semitism. And what we see in the Labour Party has a trickle-down effect onto what's happening on campus. So to give an example, something that happened yesterday in the University of Essex, there's not a large Jewish population there, and they want to set up their own new Jewish society. So they hold a referendum, and the question is, should there be a Jewish society? Well, obviously there should be a Jewish society, but over 200 people voted no. And a professor at the university posted on Facebook saying, the Zionists are trying to set up a society. Well, how do you know if they're Zionist? Are you assuming they're Zionist just because they're Jewish? Not necessarily. It's not some conspiracy. And then we look more into this person. Turns out they've been involved in Holocaust denial. They've done some number crunching on the number of Jews massacred in the Holocaust, and they've called it Zionist mathematics, what has happened there. So we see here the link between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, and how on campus that manifests, and it can have very severe consequences for Jewish students on campus. I will say that in general, the majority of Jewish students will go about their lives without ever seeing anti-Semitism. So last year, there were 25 incidents of anti-Semitism on UK campuses. That's recorded by the Community Security Trust, who's the Jewish community's anti-Semitism watchdog and reporting centre. And that's in comparison to 8,500 Jewish students in the UK, around 2 million students in higher education. So you can see the scale of it. Obviously, one incident of anti-Semitism is one too many, and those 25 incidents are horrific, and the effect on Jewish students is very severe. But we're not at crisis point yet, and Jewish students can still have wonderful, free Jewish lives in the UK, for sure.
Right. This connection between anti-Zionist activism and the impact it has on Jewish life. Do you get the impression that people in this house, irrespective of where they stand on Israel, whether they understand what the potential and also very often very concrete impact is on Jewish life, how it intimidates very often Jewish students and others in this debate? Do you think there's a feeling for this, an understanding for this among many of your colleagues?
Among some of them, hopefully for a majority, there is at least some kind of understanding that some acts of violence, some acts against people, or not only against people because they are there, they are against them because they are Jewish. and they are against them because they are maybe Zionists, or they are against them because the buildings where these violence acts happen are synagogues or places where Jewish people meet. So we should avoid to be naive, and we should fight naivety within European Parliament and generally within European politics and European societies regarding anti-Semitism. Because if it happens that sometimes it appears that anti-Zionism could be, let's say, an excuse for a criminal act or for a violent act, which is actually anti-Semitic and as well anti-Zionism, then we go in the wrong direction.
Right.
We have to work against naivety. We don't have to be naive. We have to clearly see that, as you said in the beginning, anti-Semitism is unfortunately increasing within the European Union, in Europe, and we have to fight it from the very beginning. And it must be a focused issue in European politics, and European Parliament has to follow this obligation in many different respects, from the local level, from the educational level, from the elementary school level, beginning to the global politics level, where Israel has to be counted as an ally.
Maybe last question to you. Israel in the United Nations, very often treated like the Jew among the nations, and disproportional number of resolutions are targeting Israel. The language is often just awful. And unfortunately, all too many EU member states either vote in favor of these resolutions or abstain. The German Liberal Party now called on the German government to put an end to this. I can only hope the German government and others will follow. Do you think there is some change in the air? Do you think we may see a point where EU member states realize that they're not only undermining Israel, but they are undermining the UN as an institutions by supporting unjustified and disproportional resolutions against Israel?
Yeah, actually, the Republic of Austria has already refused to follow developments like this in the United Nations, and was criticized a lot, actually, in domestic politics as well, and also on a global scale. And I appreciate what the Liberal Party in Germany does, because, again, maybe some are naive who don't see that United Nations can be abused for anti-Zionism, which is also anti-Semitism, for double standards towards Israel. And I have criticized it a lot in the past. I criticize it all the time if resolutions against Israel are decided, and I will do it in the future. And I really guess we have to be more skeptical, at least I am pretty skeptical on ongoing processes like these in United Nations, because we should not overestimate what United Nations is about. It's not always following what we call these values I have already mentioned, and that's why we have to remain skeptical. We also have to, let's say, keep thinking on what things really mean and what is really meant in the background in order to organize always the good alliance of people of goodwill, let's say it that way, all over the world. And they are not only gathering in United Nations, and sometimes they have to disagree with United Nations decisions.
Right. Well, thank you both for joining us in the studios. Thank you for tuning in, and please join us again for the next episode of Counterpoint. Thank you.
Thank you.